Hello and most welcome to 716. We have a really cold winter's day here. There's something like 6 minus. I don't know what that equalizes in Fahrenheit. Maybe 10 Fahrenheit minus. I don't know. It's clouded, I'm afraid, which makes it a bit boring. Usually one of the perks of having really cold weather is that you have a clear sky. And here we seem to have a devious combination of the two. Well, we should be happy at least we have snow to brighten up our day. Today I will introduce a new subject, and that's called neurophenomenology, and it has to do with an idea I have of enforcing the progress of going from T1, N1 to T2 to N2. Or actually it's the other way around, going from T2 and N2 to N1 and T1. And this neurophenomenology is very into the same thing as rehabilitation of the system to make it balance once more. And it's an article from Susanne A.J. Stewart, University of Glasgow, and it's called The Union of the Two Nervous Systems, Neurophenomenology, Ekinesthesia and the Alexander Technique. This is a new field, neurophenomenology, and it's how about the connection between neurons and the phenomena that accompanies them. And there is a foundation of the work. And the first is that all activity is co-activity. We exist in a world of immanent agents and things separable only because we take objects of perception to be the result of singular modalities, most usually visual, and then impose them on linguistic order. The second is that processes of coagential resonance and fragmentation typify our natural pre-reflexive, preconceptual engagement. And the third is that all living agential action is characterized by recursive, effective, anticipatory dynamics. And the fourth is that there can be no assumption of an ontological primacy of mental or physical or explanatory primacy of any method. So what does this all mean? Well, I'm going to explain from the text a little bit later, but I'll start with my own explanation. All activity is co-activity. We are participating in a communal giving and taking. And when we sometimes separate something, make something to become four-handed, as Heidegger would put it, that's an exception. That's not real. So we need to understand that all activity is in a network of activity. Whether that activities are persons, group of persons, objects, organizations, reflections, references, correspondence, and relations, etc. And this coagential resonance, it's something that is naturally pre-reflective and preconceptible in what we do. And this second has to do with, for instance, Benjamin Libet, that we react before the reflective consciousness is engaged. So we have a system that understands everything and reacts. It is, however, not controlled, as Libet showed, well, not controlled in the way that we thought. And the third, that all living agential action is characterized by a recursive, affective, anticipatory dynamics. And that means that we, before something happens, already have an attitude. That's the planning. And how that works time-wise, we're going to get into further when we go into the article. Oh, sorry. So what is this ekinesthesia we found in the name of the article? In his preface to the Phenomenology of Perception, Maurice Merleau-Ponty writes that phenomenology is a philosophy for which the world is always already there, before reflection begins, as an inalienable presence, and all its effort are concentrated upon re-achieving a direct and primitive contact with the world, and endowing that contact with a philosophical status. Susan writes here, part of my project here is to demonstrate that the always already there of our direct and primitive contact in our ekinesthetic engagement. So let us begin by unpacking the notion of ekinesthesia. Ekinesthesia describes our plenisentient, well, that means many senses. Tactile, auditory, visual, gustatory, olfactory, kinesthetic, nociceptive, proprioceptive, possibly naturally synesthetic, effectively entangled living being with our world. It emphasizes both the felt neuromuscular dynamics of the agent, that is, the givenness and ownership of the agent's experience. And the entwined and situated co-affecting imminence of other, agential, fox, cockroach, bacteria, human beings, and non-agential, like Jodhpur's sandpaper and coffee. Immanence is used to signify and emphasize the direct non-duality of the inescapable experience of other, and also always becoming. Our kinesthetic experience of other agents will include our anticipated arc of their intentional action or movement, which is to say that our lived intentional experience represents the lived intentional experience of the other. It is the affective intentional reciprocity of other sensing and experiencing agents that constitutes conscious relations and that contributes to the experientially recursive temporal dynamics that led to the formation and maintenance of integral kinesthetic structures. It is these kinesthetic structures that express the perpetual felt community and reciprocity of our living being in an kinesthetic field, where field is used to refer to the region in which a particular condition prevails. In this case, field refers to the topologically complex, affectively laden dialogue field of our being with the world. Let's pull me some coffee here. No. So what is meant is that we have a pre-reflexive, intuitive understanding of ourselves within this kinesthetic field, where each action is effective and engenders affect, and that affect engenders action, not just within ourselves, but within all life. Thus, it is through our kinesthetic entanglement that we create intercorporal resonance with those agents with whom and those objects with which we are in relations of perpetual community and reciprocity within the experiential repertoire of our lived world. As Merleau-Ponty says, whenever I try to understand myself, the whole fabric of perceptible world comes too, and with it comes the others who are caught in it. Gendlin characterized this as an implicit interactional bodily intricacy. And when we say ourselves, it needs a clarification here. Ourselves should not become hostage to fortune because it seems once again to individuate. It is beyond doubt that the capacity to affect and be affected entails an individuating event in which one actively participates and is immersed, but the individuation is impersonal and pre-individual. In this respect, I agree with Gilles Deleuze. Susan writes that the one is a science fiction, deprived from the simulation of identity produced as an optical effect. More needs to be said about this, but unfortunately not here. Now we have something from Gendlin, and it's the body that implies its situation and its next behavior. We sense our body not as elaborate perceptions, but as the body sense our situations. The interactional whole body which we orient and know what we are doing. And that's massively interesting. It means that the idea of being singular comes after individuation. And to say that the world starts with singular individuals is a science fiction, as Gilles Deleuze said. I tend to agree to that, although it's a lot to understand before lunch. Ekinesthesia presents this living co-effectively as a primordial condition for living being, with its inherent affective entanglement of being with and being among, which comes already clothed in aboutness, already saturated with intentionality. Such intentional saturation, being always already ekinesthetically entangled, requires synrhythmic regulation, which couples the volitional and experiential functions of the minds of infant and mother through sympathetic response of their brains to the anatomical forms and dynamics of movement in structures of their body. Although I have a local concern about the use of the word mind, because it seems to presume an ontological distinction that does not need to be made. I'm taking experiential functions to be a broad brush that includes plenisentient affect. In this way, I take Trevarton's quotation to express the basis of ekinesthetic balance and counterbalance. In an ekinesthetic reading of Gendlin, we might understand this to mean the attunement and coordination of interactional whole body environment through mutual, reciprocal, affective adaptation. In this way, ekinesthesia provides us with means of beginning to understand and discuss the dynamics of polyadic experiential resonance and fragmentation. Ekinesthetic resonance has a particular field or phenodynamic, by which is meant that a diachronism that distinguishes it in particular from experiential phenodynamics of friction, fragmentation and conflict. We can begin to think about the ekinesthetic field of synrhythmically regulated resonance with the notions of absurd or smooth coping, where the world, or other agents, objects and obstacles absents itself as we act skillfully in a steady flow of plenisentient, reciprocal, affective adaptation. If you just think for a moment of playing the piano or dancing a waltz, these can each be done poorly, where the wrong notes are struck, the tempo is disorganized, or you stand on your partner's feet. At these times, there is friction and fragmentation of the longed for coordination. But there are also times when the instrument is brought into the body in the senses that it ceases to be other or alien. It has been incorporated and the sound is full and flowing, or when the person with whom you are dancing ceases to be a separate person, for in the fluency of your movement you feel and act as one. On these occasions, the body is no longer an object with fixed boundaries, but the practical unification of coordinated activity. Mastery of a tool allows its incorporation within the field of one's bodily comportment. The difference between smooth competence and clumsy ineptness reflects the degree of bodily assimilation of the tool. This is a quote from Joseph Rouse. Most interesting. Joseph Rouse continues, wielding relevant equipment and interacting with other practitioners is not an indifferently instrumental taking up of various discrete means to choose an ends, but a referentially interrelated in order to for the sake of complex, which sustains the intelligibility of its component, practices and equipment. We might describe this as being in the zone or in the moment, where the moment is not a discrete punctuated event, but a Husserlian living present, which is always co-livingly, ekinesthetically active, drawing us along with our world and forward anticipatingly. So just as Merleau-Ponty says that our body is a grouping of lived-through meanings that moves toward its equilibrium, we now say that there is an ekinesthetic move towards resonance within the immanent affected and affecting whole body environment. And just as Merleau-Ponty says, the process of grasping a meaning is performed by the body. We now say that it is in the shifting synrhythmic resonance and fragmentation of our ekinesthetic entanglement that meaning arises. So our ekinesthetic dialogue or melody carries within itself or comes gifted with an immanent intelligibility, intelligibility, intelligibility. And it is this akinesthetic immanent intelligibility with its phenotypics for resonance, friction and fragmentation, fluency and flow, that Alexander technique practitioners seek with their pupils. And now we come into the next paragraph about the Alexander technique. And as we all know, Alexander learned how to re-educate natural somatosensory kinetic relations between his head, neck and his back to bring back into alignment the core of the body that supports the strengths of the limbs and which provides the structural environment for breathing and for internal organs. His harmful bodily habits had led him to a faulty sensory appreciation of the rightness of his felt movements. And because they felt right, they continued until he was forced by encountering a hindrance to reflect on and make himself aware of what was going wrong. And this is parallel to what I'm grasping for here now. It's the actual process of rebalancing. The elongated time when you learn to regroup your muscle groups from T2 and N2 to N1 and T1. Process of maybe 9 to 10 months. And what happens in this process is that the whole akinesthetic system is going to change. Your relation with other people, how you perceive the world, and as Alexander said, it's a bodily thing as well. And he's talking about the core of the body. And the core of the body, of course, is what we often refers to as the back. But it's a bit more than that. There's where all the energy actually is coming from. The energy that makes us strong in our movements, make our movements smooth, they make our thinking accurate, and they make our actions appropriate and poised. And those things are incredibly important. And the reason Suzanne brings in Merleau-Ponty and Rouse and Gendlin here is because there is a co-equal change within the life world, and that's usually not mentioned to that degree in Alexander. We get the impression, and I'm quite sure Alexander never meant that it has to do with the body only somehow, although he's constantly talking about psychophysical unity. But we need to see what happens with our thinking process when they start to kick in again. And we know they do when N1 is working again. N2 cannot do any proper thinking. It cannot understand because its purpose is just flight and fight, nothing else. I think there is a saying from Malaysia, where there is fear, there can be no learning. And what actually it's referring to, I think, it's engage N1 and T2. There can be no learning. The only thing is a repetitive movement as something like we usually today call learning. But it's repetitive and it doesn't really give anything new. I think I end here. It's a handful. I'm sorry about this, but I'm struggling myself. I've never seen a paper, well, had to be Rappaport, but this paper is well written, but it's full with knowledge of half of philosophy when it comes to phenomenology, and also the very latest when it comes to neural development in science. I'll have to go back to that, but we terminate here and I say thank you very much and have a pleasant afternoon.